Welcome all of you to the Way Optics class, the entrance exam questions discussion, not the theory. So welcome to you. We will be discussing about synopsis first, and in the next session we will be discussing about the questions. First we will see what are the things we get in wave optics and how we have to blend the theory for the entrance exam purpose, because simply understanding definitions and theory will not be enough for entrance exam classes. You should have a thorough knowledge on the formulas, how to use them, how to apply them in different cases. Now we will see how that wave optics part has developed. It is a part of optics which deals with the nature of light. It is not the geometric property of light. That is dealt in ray optics. Now we have wave optics. So in wave optics, many things have started developing in the olden days. It was Descartes who first told that light is a stream of particles, but he didn't put all these things in a particular way. He didn't put his own theory, and all the ideas of Descartes and along with the few more ideas were put into a particular theory called corpuscular theory. It was given by Isaac Newton. So initially it was initiated by Descartes, whereas it is moved forward by Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton put them in a book called Optics, and he said that light is a stream of particles, and different sized particles will have different speed, and they have different colors. Different sized particles will have different colors. And he also said that when a beam of particles fall on a refracting surface, there is a force of attraction. And when a beam of particles fall on a reflecting surface, there is a force of repulsion. That is what Newton said. But later on, it was found that some surfaces, a part of the light when falls on the surface gets refracted, a part of the light gets reflected. So how come some particles are attracted by the surface, how they are reflected by the same surface? That question, simultaneous reflection and refraction, was not explained by Newton. So this theory failed. And the major drawback of this theory, you may be asked to identify, that is major drawback of the theory is Newton says that light travels faster in denser medium and slower in rarer medium, which is not true. Nowadays we know that it is clearly that light travels faster in rarer medium and slower in denser medium. But according to Newton, when it travels from rarer to denser medium, it should bend away from the normal. In the denser medium, its velocity should increase, so which is wrong. And later on, it was experimentally proved that light travels faster in rarer medium, not in denser medium. So there is a big blow to the corpuscular theory. So we don't use corpuscular theory nowadays. So the main drawbacks are it couldn't explain simultaneous reflection and refraction. It couldn't explain that light travels faster in rarer and not in denser, but it said that light travels faster in denser. So that is a major drawback, and this theory was discarded. And later on, of course, Isaac Newton had tremendous achievements in optics. Of course, even though his theory didn't become very proper, but his ideas were very important in the growth of physics or optics especially. And when light falls on prism, he said that it divides into 7 different colors, and people know it. And he is the first person who did this experiment. And according to next Christian Huygens, he came and said that light is a wave. And as Newton said that light is a particle, Huygens' theory was light is a wave. It is like water ripples formed in the surface of water. So there was a war between Newton and Huygens at that time, saying that one says that light is a particle, another says that light is a wave. But Huygens' theories became successful for a very long time, except that Huygens' theory couldn't explain how does light travel in a vacuum. Because if light is a wave, it should need a medium. By that time, people were arguing that any wave requires a medium. And similarly, light. But nowadays, we know that the medium is not necessary for light to travel. If there is a medium like water and glass, it can travel. Even if there is no medium, if it is vacuum, light can travel. So according to Christian Huygens, light is a wave, but he couldn't explain how does light travel in vacuum. So his theory fails actually in that manner, but the theory was successful in many ideas. It was successful in explaining many concepts of light. So it became successful in most of the cases, in most of the phenomena of light. So Christian Huygens secondary wave concept, that is what we study in our book. He says that whenever light falls on a certain medium, maybe refracting medium or reflecting medium, secondary waves start from different parts of the medium. What do you mean by secondary waves? Each part of the medium acts like a source of light. For example, when sun's light falls on the chalk, you can see the chalk in the hands of your teacher. The reason is, according to Christian Huygens, he says that when light from the sun falls on the chalk, each point of the chalk acts like a secondary source. So it emits light, its own light. That light is received by our eyes. So when we see the chalk, actually it is the light from the sun which is reflected from the chalk which enters our eyes. But we don't see the sun in the chalk. Actually, they are coming originally from the sun. But Huygens says that when this light falls on the chalk, each point on the chalk will act like a secondary source, and it re-emits that light back. And that means into our eyes. So that is why we were able to see the chalk, not the sun, even though the light is originated from the sun. At the end, they are the secondary waves generated from the chalk. So that is the concept of secondary waves. And now, according to Huygens, each point source emits secondary waves in all the directions. So secondary waves travel in all the directions, like a source of sound. Suppose a cracker is producing sound at a point. That sound travels in all the directions. So it is growing like a spear. So he says a point source emits spherical wave fronts. You can see here the part of the spear. A point source emits a spherical wave fronts like this. And if you continue this, you will get a spear. So that is what he says. So secondary waves emitted from the point source of light, they appear like a spear. So they form a spear. Okay. So point source emits a spherical wavefront, and each wavefront will act like a secondary source. So secondary waves start from these sources and they form another spear. So it keeps on growing as the light travels further and further. And if you draw a perpendicular line to these secondary waves, you get a ray. So ray is a normal to the secondary waves. Here also, this is a secondary wave starting from P, and if you draw a normal, it gives a ray. So, and you imagine a source of light like tube light. Now you know that point source emits spherical wavefront. What about a linear source? Suppose you imagine a tube light like arrangement here kept like this. Tube light doesn't emit light from this side and from this side. From the two ends of the tube light, no light comes out. Only light is emitted from the surface of the tube light, not from the edges. So what happens when these light waves travel in all the directions? We get a cylinder, right? So a linear source emits cylindrical wavefront, whereas a point source emits a spherical wavefront. And whether that linear source or point source, whether they are far away, whatever be the source of light, point source or linear source, when you take it at a larger distance, this wavefront becomes almost a plane. So a point source, see here, you can see the spear here. When it is at a very small distance, a point source is emitting spherical wavefront. When you are at a very large distance, a point source is emitting plane wavefront. So when the distance is very large, the wavefront, secondary waves look almost plane, even though they are form a spear. They almost look like plane, and this is a plane wavefront, and that is very similar to parallel rays. Whatever you have in our concept now, rays, that is a normal drawn to the wavefront. So a point source emits spherical wavefront, a linear source emits cylindrical wavefront, and whatever be the source, if it is at a very far away distance, then it emits plane wavefronts like parallel waves, parallel rays. Yeah, sorry. That is the idea of Christian Huygens, and you have studied this in theory. When parallel rays are incident, that means plane wavefront is incident on a convex lens. They get focused at the focus. They meet at the focus. Why it is so? Because Huygens' explanation is very interesting. You see, when the plane wavefront falls on this lens, when the plane wavefront falls on this, that means parallel rays fall on this. In the wavefront, this point is first reached by the wave. Some waves here, at this point, they touch the lens immediately. But by that time, these waves will not touch the lens because lens is bent like this. So waves which are going in this direction here, they hit the lens first. So these waves have to travel a larger distance, whereas these waves have to travel a smaller distance inside the lens. So what happens? These waves move quicker. because they will have to travel lesser distance in the lens. These waves have to travel a larger distance in the lens, so they lag behind. So these waves will have to travel a more distance, so they lag behind. These waves are bent forward. That's why you get a wave like this. That is what we say, it is focusing at a point. So this produces spherical wavefront. Here it is a plane wavefront. That means parallel rays of light. Once they pass through the prism, the shape of the prism is such that these rays, here they lag behind, here they move forward. So you get a spherical wavefront, and finally they get focused here. So that's how we explained refraction through a lens and a prism and all. And later came, so we know now, we see that Descartes said that light is a corpuscle set of particles, and Newton put it in a very beautiful theory called optics, and he said that it is corpuscular theory, and he said that light is made up of corpuscles, but it failed to explain how does light travel faster in rarer medium. It said that light travels faster in a denser medium. That was a major blow. That was a mistake. And Huygens secondary theory, secondary wavelets theory, we saw that every point on the wavefront acts like a source of secondary waves. And the third one, James Clerk Maxwell, and he proposed his own theory called electromagnetic wave theory, because Huygens wave theory couldn't explain how does light travel in vacuum. According to Huygens, light is a wave. It's a mechanical wave. It should need a medium. That's what his argument. But by that time, non-mechanical waves were not in picture at all. That light need not require any medium. That concept was not clear at that time. So when Huygens said that light is a wave, the first question that raised was, how come light travel in vacuum? There is no medium in vacuum. How does light travel in vacuum? For example, we have water ripples. But if there is no water, what come water ripples? We can't see them at all. If there is no air, how come sound travel? It is not possible. So there should be a need of medium. That's what people were thinking. But at that time, James Clerk Maxwell gave a entirely different new idea that medium is not a must, medium is not the necessity, and EVA light can travel even without medium, because light is a combination of electric and magnetic fields, timely varying electric and magnetic fields. And how these electric and magnetic fields are changing, diagrammatically you can show it like this, but it is a combination of electric and magnetic fields. We have shown it in the form of graph, that's all. Electric field is shown by an arrow mark in one direction. Magnetic field is shown by another arrow mark in the other direction. Electric field is shown by blue lines and magnetic field by red lines here. That's all the difference. So you see at every point, whether electric field and magnetic field is same at every point. No, if you just observe a single point, electric field is growing, magnetic field is growing, and electric field falls to zero, magnetic field also falls to zero. You just observe any point. When the electric field reaches maximum at any point, the magnetic field also reaches maximum. So I will observe this point now. After some time, now it is maximum here. It decreases to zero at another moment. So timely varying electric and magnetic fields, that produces electromagnetic wave. So if you want to produce any electric magnetic wave, on one hand you should have electric field, another hand you should have magnetic field, and this electric and magnetic field should keep on changing with time. That produces electromagnetic wave. This concept was given by Maxwell, and that is why today we have video signals, radio signals, and everything. And we were able to transmit these electromagnetic waves for a longer distance, and you can catch it in another place even without wires. You can have wireless communication. And Heinrich Hertz, he proved that Maxwell's theory is correct, and you can produce an electromagnetic wave in the laboratory itself. That is what Heinrich Hertz's contribution. And Heinrich Hertz proved the electromagnetic wave theory practically, whereas Maxwell proposed the electromagnetic theory. Maxwell simply gave some formulas, some mathematical equations, and said that light can be an electromagnetic wave. But Heinrich Hertz practically proved it, that it is possible to produce an electromagnetic wave. So you can have two sentences. Maxwell proposed theory, Heinrich Hertz proved the theory. So who proved electromagnetic wave theory? Proof is given by Heinrich Hertz. Who proposed theoretically? It was Maxwell. Okay, Heinrich Hertz was doing some experiment with the that electromagnetic wave, and so photoelectric effect, and he was able to get this sorry, when he was doing electromagnetic wave experiment, he was able to prove that photoelectric effect also. Okay. Now, so after that, so many inventions have occurred. Once electromagnetic waves were prepared, and people started producing high frequency, low frequency electromagnetic wave, and Marconi was able to transmit this electromagnetic wave for a longer distance and receive it back, and that was the invention of radio. And Indian J.C. Bose was able to send high frequency electromagnetic waves for a longer distance, and so many inventions have occurred. And nowadays, for communication, we have plenty of electromagnetic waves. So if James Clerk Maxwell was not thinking of electromagnetic waves, we would not have had all these inventions now. So that was a major contribution to the society, the production of electromagnetic waves as well as the theory of electromagnetic waves. So at the end, we have electromagnetic wave theory. Of course, even after that, we have dual nature of light and quantum theory and all. So for the wave theory, this is enough. So light is a electromagnetic wave. It is a transverse electromagnetic wave. It consists of electric and magnetic vibrations, and both the electric and magnetic vibrations are perpendicular to each other, and they are in phase. What do you mean by in phase? You see the origin here. When the electromagnetic wave becomes plus maximum, electric field, magnetic field also becomes plus maximum. When the electric field becomes zero, magnetic field also becomes zero. When the electric field becomes negative, magnetic field also becomes negative. What do you mean by that? Electric and magnetic fields attain their highest value and the lowest value together. That means they are in phase. You don't find any situation here when electric field is maximum, magnetic field is zero. There is no such situation. They are in phase. So they are timely varying electric and magnetic fields. Now we will go to waves. Take light as a wave now. Consider Huygens theory. Consider electromagnetic theory proposed by Maxwell. So if light is a wave, when two waves superpose, what will happen? If light is a wave, like sea wave, for example, when you go to the seashore and when you stand by the side of the seashore, you find that some waves hit to the shore and return back. But when they go back, a new wave comes and falls over the returning back wave. Now they superpose. When they superpose, you may get a larger wave, or you may get a destroyed wave, because there may not be any wave at all. It is like applying a force. Suppose I give you two forces, two persons. They can pull a body in the same direction. Result is maximum. They can pull the body in the opposite direction. Result is zero. Similarly, two waves can fall with the crest on their crest. Can you see two waves here? Red and green. Blue is the resultant, remember. Blue is the resultant wave drawn here. But red and green are individual waves. Now, when these individual waves superpose, blue represents the resultant wave. Suppose green and red waves superpose with each other. Now you see. Now yes, they have superposed. Now you get maximum blue wave. When the crest falls on trough, the crest of red falls on trough, you don't have blue wave at all. Blue wave becomes zero. So when the crest falls on crest, maximum blue wave. When the crest falls on trough of green, so we have minimum blue wave, right? So crest falls on trough. That means in the superposition, there is a rule how it is done. Now, if I can show you, just observe the red and green waves. When the red and green waves are together, that means crest falling on crest, you get a maximum wave. For example, here it is maximum now. When the crest of green wave falls on the trough of other, you will have blue wave zero. So that is called superposition. When two waves superpose, you can't say the resultant is so much. For example, 4 Newton force and 3 Newton force are acting on a body. What is the resultant if it is asked? So you can't always predict that it is 7. Why? If they are acting in the same direction, if theta is 0, then resultant of 4 and 3 Newton will be 7 Newton. If they are acting in the opposite direction, and then 4 minus 3, 1 Newton. So the angle at which they fall is also important. Similarly, the angle, phase angle at which the two waves fall on each other is also important here. If the crest are falling, maximum resultant you will get A plus B. When the crest and trough fall, you see here, crest and trough fall, you get A minus B. If A and B are equal, then A minus A 0. So that is how the waves superpose. If these are water ripple waves, you will in the pond or in a tank, if you produce water ripples, 2 or 3 ripples, when they superpose, if the crest falls on crest, you will get a large wave. When the crest falls on trough, you don't get any wave at all there. That is called superposition. So now let us see at some points about the wave. You know that a wave has an amplitude, correct? And wave can be given a phase difference. Here is the phase pi, here is the phase 2 pi. What do you mean by phase 2 pi? It has returned back to the original condition. Now it will repeat very similar to the first wave. That is 2 pi, 360 degree. You are coming back to the origin, right? 360 degree means you are completing one full rotation and coming back to your original place. Now, suppose you take a wave, and if its amplitude is A, frequency is F, and if it is traveling in a medium of density rho, then what do you mean by intensity of the wave? Intensity is a very simple thing. Suppose you are standing somewhere and you are receiving sound waves from somewhere source. Suppose somebody is talking in a mic and you are receiving the sound waves. Now, original sound will be traveling in all the directions, whereas what you receive in your ears is a part of the sound. Suppose a cracker is blasted at a point, you will receive some sound energy. That sound energy is only a part of the sound energy that you have received. That is called energy received per second per unit area. That is intensity. Intensity is the energy received per second per unit area of the surface. It is not the total energy emitted from the source. For example, we are on the earth now. Sun is emitting its own rays, right? Light energy. Do we receive all the light energy emitted from the sun? Never. Because we are a small part around the sun, and earth doesn't cover the sun completely. Suppose sun was completely covered by earth, then we would have received all the light emitted from the sun. It is as if you put a bulb inside a box, then the box traps all the light emitted from the bulb. Suppose you take the bulb out and hold it in front of a book, then the book doesn't receive all the light emitted from the that bulb. Similarly, intensity of a wave is only that part what you receive, that part of the sound that we receive from the source, that part of the light energy emitted from the sun received by the earth. That is intensity. So intensity of any wave is given by 2 pi squared f squared a squared rho v, where f is the frequency of the wave, a is the amplitude of the wave, rho is the density of the medium in which light is traveling, and v is the speed of that wave, right? F is the frequency of the wave, rho is the density of the medium, a is the amplitude of the wave, and v is the speed of the wave. 2 pi squared f squared a squared rho v. Now, my question here is in superposition. You know that when two or more waves superpose, amplitude keeps on changing, correct? If the wave superpose with crest and crest, then we get maximum amplitude. If it falls, crest falls on trough, then you know that minimum amplitude. So amplitude keeps on changing. So I want only this intensity of a wave is directly proportional to square of the amplitude. That is what I want. That is the only thing I want. Intensity of a wave is directly proportional to square of the amplitude. That is the main thing I want. Okay, we will proceed. So you must know the total formula also. I is equal to 2 pi squared f squared a squared rho v. But don't say that rho is the medium of the wave. It is the medium through which wave is traveling. V is the value of speed of the wave. Okay, now coming into two waves, superposition. Now I will consider one wave. One wave traveling from right to left, say. Okay, its amplitude is A. Okay, its maximum displacement is A. Now let me take another wave traveling in the same direction. Let it travel like this. Now, at every point you see, you ask this what color wave, this one, black wave, say, the smaller one. You ask that black wave. Black wave, what about your condition? Are you along with blue wave? Yes, sir. Because crest of black wave is falling on the crest of blue wave also. Both are having crest falling on crest. So what about here? Crest falling on crest, trough falling on trough. You ask the two waves. At every point, crest is falling on crest, trough is falling on trough. You ask the blue wave and that dark black wave. Are you falling in phase? Yes, sir. We are falling in phase. Wherever the crest of one wave falls, the crest of another wave also falls, and the resultant wave will be maximum. This is the resultant. What the resultant wave produced will be maximum everywhere. It is A plus B. This is called constructive interference. So when you are standing by the side of the seashore, if one wave enters enters nearer to us, and when it returns back, if another wave from the sea goes and hits to the other wave, the resultant amplitude of the resultant wave depends on this factor. If the crest falls on crest, the returning wave and the forward wave are superposed such that both the crest fall at the same point, then the resultant wave is highest. Okay, now we will go to the next case. So resultant amplitude is A plus B. A of red wave and B of blue wave, and finally this is A plus B. What about if the crest falls on trough? That we will say. Now this is one wave traveling from right to left, its amplitude is A. See another wave. Now everywhere the crest is falling on trough. Can you see that? Crest is falling on trough. Now what happens? The amplitudes cancel each other. A water molecule here is pushed up by one wave. At the same time, the water molecule here is pushed down by another wave. What is the condition of that particle now? You ask that particle whether you are going up according to this wave or whether you are going down according to the other wave. Sir, I don't know what to do. I am standing still here. I am neither going up not going down. So amplitude decreases. A minus B is the resultant amplitude. And if A and B are equal, fortunately, then A minus A 0. We don't get any wave there at all. So when two water ripples superpose, if the crest of one ripple falls on the trough of another, the net resultant will be almost 0, provided the amplitude of them are equal. If the amplitudes are not equal, then of course resultant is not 0. Okay, moving on. Yes. Now, so what is the condition needed for constructive interference and destructive interference now? For the formation of constructive interference, we need crest falling on crest. Am I right? Crest falling on crest. Then we get larger amplitude wave. For the formation of destructive interference, crest should fall on trough. Now we will see the formation of both at different points. Sir, how do we get crest falling on crest? How do we get crest falling on trough? Whether it is water ripples, whether it is light waves, whether it is sound waves. Of course, in sound waves, compression falling on compression, rarefaction falling on rarefaction, or compression falling on rarefaction. There we don't have crest and trough. Okay. Now let me take a tuning fork and produce a sound wave like this. Sound wave means they are longitudinal waves. They keep on vibrating. The air molecules keep on vibrating and the sound travels. Let me produce another wave over this. And if both the waves are falling on each other, then the resultant amplitude is maximum here, right? There are two waves now, one over the other. You can't see that. Now here the amplitudes add up because everywhere crest is falling on crest. Now I will make one of the waves move forward. Let it move forward. Okay. Where did I see that? I have to see the S. Okay, this is over. So this one, okay, this is over. Now, let me move the first wave little bit fast forward. Now you stand here, somewhere here, and ask the two waves. One is red one, and another is blue one. Right, almost red or brown and blue one. Now ask the red wave. You stand here and ask the red wave. Red wave, how much distance you have traveled? And ask the blue wave also. Blue wave, how much you have traveled? Blue says, sir, I started little late. How much late? Half lambda. You ask the red wave will answer, sir, I started little earlier. How much? Half lambda. So by the time the two waves start and reach somewhere here, say for example here, anywhere you can say, you can stop them and you can ask them at any point. Now blue wave says that I traveled half lambda less, and red wave says that I traveled half lambda more. and that is called path difference. That is the meaning of path difference. These two waves are having a path difference of now lambda by 2. Now question is, because of path difference of lambda by 2, crest is falling on trough. What is the resultant wave here? Nothing. Resultant is 0. Now let us move one of the waves. So when they were like this, resultant wave is highest. When one of the wave was asked to move forward, then now the crest falls on trough. Now the path difference is lambda by 2. And again I make this blue wave to move still forward. Now what is the path difference? Path difference is lambda. If you ask red wave, it has traveled a distance lambda extra. If you ask blue wave, it has traveled lambda distance less. But still, crest falls on crest. We get a constructive interference. So if two waves, when they superpose, if there is a path difference of lambda by 2, last case, there is destructive. If there is a path difference of lambda, that is constructive. Again 1.5 lambda, that is 3 lambda by 2, destructive. Again 2 lambda, constructive. Correct? Again crest falls on crest. So if the path difference is lambda, 2 lambda, 3 lambda, 4 lambda, exact lambdas, result is constructive. Crest falls on crest. If the path difference is lambda by 2, 3 lambda by 2, that means 1.5 lambda, 5 lambda by 2, that is 2.5 lambda. If it is a fraction of lambda, then the crest falls on trough. Resultant amplitude is 0. Hope you have followed this one. So path difference also matters here. No path difference, both are traveling the same distance up to this. Now blue wave has traveled forward. So red has to travel more, lambda by 2, destructive. Then 1 lambda, constructive. 1.5 lambda, destructive. So like this. That is the path difference. Now we need this in the future class now, a future explanation. For constructive interference, you need path difference of n lambda. Did you understand that? You should have exact difference of lambda, like this, like this, like this, like this. So there is a 2 lambda difference here. Whereas, so for constructive interference, you need a path difference of 1 lambda. For example, here, see, this is 1 lambda. This is 2 lambda difference, right? From this wave, this is 1 lambda. From this wave, this is 2 lambda. This wave is traveling 2 lambda less. This wave is traveling 1 lambda less. Wave is traveling completely from here to here. So, but crest falls on crest everywhere. Whether this wave has traveled or it has traveled lambda extra, this wave has traveled lambda less, 2 lambda less, crest is falling on crest. So if the path difference is n lambda, phase difference is 2n pi. You know this, right? Because if n equal 1, you will have 1 lambda extra here. That corresponds to 2 pi. So n equals 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. So phase difference means this one. In the first wave diagram I have shown, yeah, this is 2 pi, you see. This is 0, this is pi, this is 2 pi. So 1 full lambda means it is 1 full 2 pi. If it is 2 lambda, it is 4 pi. 2 lambda, here it is 4 pi. So if the path difference is n lambda, then it is constructive. Phase difference is 2n pi. Put n equals 0, 0. Path difference n equals 0, 0. N equal 1 lambda. Here 2 pi. N equal 2, 2 lambda. Here it is 4 pi. So like that. Okay. Now, if you come back to destructive interference, crest should fall on trough. Now you see, if this wave travels more and if this wave travels less, how much less? How much less you have to create? Lambda by 2. If it is traveling lambda by 2 extra, then crest falls on crest. Can you suggest me one more here? It is 1.5 lambda extra. So 1 lambda, 1.5 lambda. Then the crest falls on trough. Okay. So if the path difference is n plus half lambda, that means put n equals 0, half lambda. N equal 1, 1.5 lambda. If the path difference is half lambda, 1.5 lambda, 2.5 lambda, and so on, then the crest falls on trough. Resultant amplitude is 0, and it's a destructive interference that doesn't yield any wave. So now, okay, we will move on. Yes. So phase difference, okay, 2n pi, that we haven't discussed. So for the formation of destructive interference, we should have half lambda, 1.5 lambda, 2.5 lambda, and so on. What if phase difference? 2n plus 1 pi. What do you mean by 2n plus 1 pi? I can show it here. See, for half lambda, it should be 1 pi. Here it should be 2 pi, right? Here it should be 2 pi. Here it should be 1 pi. So half lambda path difference means 1 pi. 2.5 path difference, 2.5 lambda path difference. Sorry, yeah, 2 here it should go for destructive. Yes. If you put n equal to 1, then it is 3 by 2. 3 by 2 is 1.5 lambda. Then this is 3 pi. So odd multiples of pi. So this is destructive interference, 2n plus 1 pi condition. Okay. Now, so intensity of the wave, again the same formula, 2 pi squared f squared a squared rho b. This is for a single wave, correct? Huh? Now, if it is a superposed wave, when the two waves superpose, the resultant amplitude sometimes may be maximum where the crest falls on crest, and it will be minimum at the crest falls on trough. Suppose amplitude are not the same, suppose both the amplitudes are same, then the maximum amplitude is a plus a, 2a. If the, and the resultant, minimum amplitude is a minus a, 0. So the amplitude resultant depends on the amplitude of the two waves also. This is a plus b, this is a minus b. Now the amplitudes are not the same. So what is the intensity of the wave here, where there is a crest falling on crest? What is the intensity of the wave here, where the crest falls on trough? When the crest falls on trough, resultant wave will be decreasing in size. When the crest falls on crest, the resultant wave will be increasing in size. What is the intensity ratio between these? You know that intensity is directly proportional to square of the amplitude. So when two waves superpose, at the point of superposition, what is the intensity? If it is constructive, intensity is directly proportional to a plus b whole square, because intensity is directly proportional to square of the amplitude. When the waves superpose, resultant amplitude is a plus b. When the waves superpose destructively, resultant amplitude is a minus b. So what is the intensity here? Proportional to a plus b whole square, not equal to, because you have so many other terms also. What is the minimum intensity? A minus b whole square. So when two waves, light waves superpose, at some places their crest may fall on trough and the resultant amplitude may destroy, and we may not get any light there. And there the intensity is a minus b whole square. At some places, crest may fall on crest and the resultant amplitude may be maximum, and I maximum will be a plus b whole square, because amplitudes will add up. So this is the resultant. So it can be beautifully understood like this. And in a pond, you dip two sticks and keep on vibrating the two sticks. Two waves will be produced. And when those two waves superpose, you will get set. Some places maximum amplitude, some places minimum amplitude. So that can be understood beautifully here. You keep on vibrating water using two balls. The two waves start traveling. And at the place where they superpose, can you find the crest and trough? At some places, no vibration at all. At some places, maximum vibration. That is because of the superposition of the two waves. You see here. At some places, maximum vibration. At some places, no vibration at all. This is a beautiful explanation of superposition of waves. You can see here. At some places, you can find maximum vibration. At some places, no vibration. At some places, complete vanished wave. At some places, completely constructed wave, a plus b and a minus b. Intensity is a plus b whole squared and a minus b whole squared, because intensity is the square of the amplitude. Okay. Now, Thomas Young, you know the famous scientist, Young's double slit experiment. Thomas Young was able to superpose not the water ripples, he was able to superpose two light waves. What did he do? What is this experiment? His experiment was like this. It was, and he took one source of light, kept it in front of a cupboard with the small hole, and in front of that he took two holes, another cupboard with two holes, and the light from this source started falling on the two wave sources. And from here onwards, light started coming out of the two holes. These two holes act like the two sources, but these two holes are giving the light from the same parent source, so they must have the same phase. In the sense, the waves must be identical. What do you call coherent sources? So light coming from these two sources must be coherent, that means identical, because they have been derived from the same parent source. Now, if this light wave travels like this, this light wave travels like this. This is a point on the screen which is at the perpendicular bisector of these two waves. Now it is similar to putting two torchlight on the wall and trying to obtain what happens when the two light waves superpose. Of course, sir, can we try interference, superposition of two waves using two sources of torch lights on the wall? I put two torch lights on the wall. At the places where crest of one wave falls on the crest of other, I should get maximum light, right? At the place where crest falls on the trough, I should get minimum light. Does it happen so, sir? No, not at all. It is not so easily observable. It needs very microscopic level, and you have to use a microscope to see that. It cannot be seen by a naked eye because it is not observable. You just imagine the wavelength of light. It is so small. Within such a small distance, all these things will occur in 10 to the power minus 9 meter, 10 to the power minus 10 meters, angstroms or nanometers size. That waves are superposing. So it is difficult, but you have to use the microscope. Now you observe these two waves. The wave coming from the point source or this hole and the wave coming from this hole, when they superpose here, definitely they will produce constructive interference here. Why, sir? You ask this wave started from here. So I will call this as source 1. I will call this as source 2. You ask this S1. S1 will directly come here and reach here. S2 will directly come here and reach here. If you ask them, then they will say that, sir, by the time we reach here, we produce constructive interference because distance traveled by this wave by the time it reaches here, distance traveled by this wave by the time it reaches here are same. There is no path difference. How many waves this will produce? This wave will produce. Same number of waves will be produced by this. So crest must fall on crest. There is no difference at all. This is a bright wave. Here the crest falls on crest. It should be a bright one. So suppose the first wave travels 1 lambda, 2 lambda, 3 lambda like this. So how much distance the wave first one travels? Say 5 lambda, 5 lambda. Crest should fall on crest. It should be a constructive interference. Now, let us move on to the next case. Suppose the two waves meet here. We are not sure whether this is a crest or a trough because this may travel with the 4 lambda and this may travel with the 6 lambda. Now, the 6th lambda highest crest and the 4th lambda highest crest may fall on each other. So, they may produce constructive interference, but there may be a chance of destructive interference also. How come, sir? Suppose this wave travels, imagine, this wave travels a distance of, say, some, I'll say some 6.5 lambda, this one. This one is traveling 5 lambda. What is the problem now? When this comes to 5 lambda, it may produce a trough. When this comes to 6.5 lambda, it produces a crest. Crest falls on trough, destructive. What is the path difference? 1.5 lambda. So if the path difference is half lambda, 1.5 lambda, 2.5 lambda, if it is a difference of half lambda, crest falls on trough. It's destructive. So if you move on the screen from here like this, will you get all types of points? Yes, sir. This point, previous one, the point where crest falls on crest, right? This is constructive. If you just go above, you will get another point where crest falls on crest. You will get another point where crest falls on crest. This is 0 lambda. This is 1 lambda. This is 2 lambda. This is 3 lambda. In between, you will get a point where the path difference is half lambda. Here 1.5 lambda, 3.5 lambda. All those points are destructive. That is dark fringes. So it is a 1.5 lambda here. And there may be a point here where the distance difference is half lambda. So it may be also destructive. So we get different fringes. Directly in front of the light, it should be bright fringe. And as you come here, here is the first destructive. Can you see the dark fringe here? Can you see the dark fringe here? That is destructive. That means if you produce this light here and here, you will get half lambda difference. Why is there half lambda by the time light travels here and here? Why it is half lambda? Because the difference between this and this is half lambda. Crest falls on trough, dark. What about bright again here? When the light travels from here to here, light travels from here to here, the difference is 1 lambda. Again bright. Dark. bright. So this is the bright fringe pattern. And you know that fringe width, what do you mean by fringe width? It is the distance between two consecutive bright fringes, or two consecutive dark fringes will also do. Distance between two successive dark fringes is also beta. What is beta? Beta is given by lambda d by d. We derived this, right? Derived this equation in the theory exam. What is capital D? Capital D is the distance between the two sources to the screen. The plane of two sources to the screen. This is D, capital D. It will be in meters. What is your small d? It is the distance between the two sources, right? So now, okay, beta is equal to lambda d by d. Yes. Okay, this is not near. Yes. Okay, here. This is beta. So D is the capital D is the distance between the sources and the screen, and the small d is the distance between the sources. Small d will be always lesser. Now let us try to write the equation for intensity. We have written. We know that if these are the two sources of light, they are produced by a single source, and these are the two holes in the cardboard, and the light coming from the two holes must produce a bright fringe here, because how many waves are created here? Same number of waves are created here. The crest falls on crest, and you get maximum intensity here. What is the maximum intensity? Suppose one source has an intensity I naught, another source has an intensity I naught. Sir, is it not 2 I naught? No. It is not 2 I naught. Why? Because intensity is directly proportional to square of the amplitude. Here the amplitude is A plus A. 2A. Amplitude is adding. Why intensity is 4 times? Because intensity is directly proportional to square of the amplitude. If it is 2A here, what is the square of it? 4A square. That means intensity is proportional to square of the amplitude, that is 4A square, and it is 4 I naught. Because intensity of one wave, if it is I naught, another wave is I naught, then it is 4 I naught here. Now, on the screen, you get bright fringe, dark fringe, bright fringe, dark fringe, and so on. Now, from the central bright fringe, select a point on the screen at certain distance. Okay, select a point on the screen at a certain distance here, say. Now, what happens? When you select a point on the screen at a certain distance, this point will be formed by the two waves starting from here and here. A wave starting from here and here, and a wave starting from here and here. When they reach here, they will produce neither bright or nor dark fringe. See, brightest is here, darkest here. This may be neither bright or dark fringe. Now, what is the intensity here? First of all, what you would find out is, waves starting from here and reaching here don't have any path difference, because this light has to travel a certain distance, this light has to travel the same distance, no path difference. Now, what is the path difference between the waves reaching here? This light and this light. My question is, where are they now on the screen from the central bright fringe? Sir, let they be at a distance x from the central bright fringe. This is the central bright fringe. This is somewhat neither bright nor dark fringe. So let it be at a distance x. So if you select a point on the screen, which is at a distance x from the central bright fringe, then path difference between the waves reaching here and here is given by this equation. Path difference delta x equal to x d by d. This is very important, this equation. Path difference delta x is equal to x d by d, where x is the distance of the point where you are observing from the central bright fringe. On the screen, if you select a point on the screen which is lying at a distance of x from the central bright fringe, what is the path difference between the waves reaching here from here and here? That is delta x equal to x d by d. Small d is the distance between the sources, capital D is the distance from the sources to the screen. Here, this capital D. Now, once you know the path difference delta x, what is the U star? You can know the phase difference between these two waves. You can know the phase difference between these two waves reaching here. What is phase difference? 2 pi by lambda into path difference. That you can know. Now, if it is so, you can find out what is the intensity here. Intensity of the light here is maximum intensity, that is 4 I naught, which is the central bright or any bright fringe, into cos squared phi by 2. Hope you have followed what I am explaining. Hope you are following. Suppose you select a point on the screen from the central bright fringe What is the intensity of light here? Now I will come to the point. Now you will go back. You will understand. Central bright fringe intensity is 4 I naught. That I know. What is the intensity of light here, which is neither dark nor bright? It is not very bright like this bright fringe. It is not very dark like this. It is neither bright nor dark. What is the intensity here? To find it out, which point you are considering? Here, sir. What is its distance from the central bright fringe? X. Find out the path difference. Convert it into phase difference. Phase difference equal to 2 pi by lambda into path difference. Once you get the phase difference, put it here, phi. Intensity here is I is equal to 4 I naught cos squared phi by 2. Use this formula. We don't get this formula in the theory. So if you want to know intensity at different points on the screen, first find out that point distance from the central bright fringe, convert it into path difference, find out the phase difference, and put that phi phase difference. Of course, I have not written phi here. That phi here, I is equal to 4 I naught cos squared phi by 2. Of course, this formula is on the synopsis. I have sent synopsis already. You need not worry. You can receive it. Okay. Later, you can see that. And this is the formula for intensity at any point on the screen. Okay. Moving on. Now, at any point, resultant amplitude is given by this formula. In the first year PU, you study the resultant of the two forces, root of a square plus b square plus 2ab cos theta, remember? Similarly, if the amplitude of the two waves are a1 and a2, or a and b, in the beginning we took it as a and b, right? You can take it as a and b also. What is the resultant amplitude? Resultant amplitude of the two waves can be a plus a, b, or a minus b, or something other also. Depends on how do they superpose, how do they meet, and what is the phase difference with which they meet. Root of a square plus b square plus 2ab cos phi, or a1 square plus a2 square plus a1 2a1 a2 cos phi, where a1 is the amplitude of one wave, a2 is the amplitude of another wave. And in terms of intensity, what is the resultant intensity when two waves superpose on each other? How do they superpose on each other? Sir, they have a phase difference of phi, sir. That means phi can be 0, phi can be 180, phi can be 60, 70, anything. So if the phase difference between the two waves is phi, resultant intensity I is equal to I1 plus I2 plus 2 root I1 I2 cos phi, because square of the amplitude is intensity. I1 plus I2 plus 2 root I1 I2 cos phi. That is another formula. Okay. Now, maximum to minimum intensity. Or what do you mean by maximum to minimum intensity? Maximum intensity is here. Minimum intensity is here. Maximum to minimum intensity ratio is a1 square plus a2 square divided by a1 minus a2 whole square. A plus b whole square divided by a minus whole square. Because you know, maximum intensity is formed at the place where amplitudes add up. Minimum intensity is formed where the amplitude is cancelling each other. So a plus b whole square by a minus b whole square, that gives the maximum intensity. Or you can write it as root of I1 plus root of I2 whole square divided by root of I1 minus root of I2 whole square. This is also another formula. Again, this formula is also available in the sheet, synopsis sheet. Now, this is called fringe visibility. What do you mean by fringe visibility? You must have a dark fringe perfectly dark, a bright fringe perfectly bright. If there is a difference between bright and dark fringes clearly, then bright fringe should be very bright and dark fringe should be very dark. That is called contrast, visibility. If the bright fringe is not very bright and the dark fringe is not very dark, you may not be able to distinguish between them. You can distinguish between the two fringes when they are having high contrast. That means bright should be very bright fringe, dark fringe should be very dark fringe. What is that? That ratio is called fringe visibility. What is visibility? Visibility is I maximum minus I minimum, maximum intensity minus minimum intensity divided by maximum intensity plus minimum intensity. That is called visibility. Or you can use this formula also if it is asked. This is also not coming in your theory part, in the theory exam. Now, suppose you are given two windows or two slits, and slits are having doors, say. We have doors in that windows of cameras, that door, window doors or lens doors. If you go on closing the window, then the amount of light entering the camera will go on decreasing. If you go on opening the window, amount of light entering the camera goes on increasing. So width of the slit, that is what you call. If the width of the window is increased, amount of light entering the that slit goes on increasing. If the width of the slit decreases, amount of light coming out of the window goes on decreasing. And if the widths of the slit are given, then what is the ratio of intensity? A window with its door completely open will have maximum light coming out of it. A window with the door closed and a small portion of the window is open will have less intensity of light coming out of it. So if the width of the slit are given, then if the width of the first slit is W1, width of the second slit is W2, then W1 by W2 is equal to A1 square by A2 square, where A is the amplitude of the light. That is equal to intensity of the first one by intensity of the second one. Intensity is directly proportional to width of the slit. Now you know fringe width is beta is equal to lambda d by d. It is the distance between two successive dark or two successive bright fringes. We know this. And this is the place where the path difference is 1 lambda. This is the place where path difference is 0 lambda, because it is directly opposite to the perpendicular bisector. This is small d, this is capital D. You know this one. Okay. Now, suppose this is a common problem. Fifth bright fringe is at a certain distance. Fourth dark fringe is at a certain distance. If you have any confusion regarding this formula, where is the nth dark fringe and where is the nth bright fringe? Very easy. See, this is bright, say. This is dark fringe, again bright, again dark, again bright, again dark. Central bright fringe is the reference. And remember, there is nothing like central dark fringe. From the slits, directly in the perpendicular bisector, you get bright fringe, no dark fringe. No dark fringe will exist in the perpendicular bisector. There is no central dark fringe, central bright fringe only. So when you go to the next bright fringe, it is 1 beta. This is 2 beta. This is 3 beta, correct? What is the distance of the third bright fringe? Of course, this is central, this is 0. This is 1, this is 2, this is 3. So distance of the central bright fringe, you see, I will name them, right? Central bright fringe B0, first bright fringe B1, next bright fringe B2, next bright fringe B3. What is the distance of the first bright fringe? 1 beta. Agree? Second bright fringe 2 beta. Third bright fringe 3 beta. Nth bright fringe n beta. No problem. If it is asked the nth bright fringe from the central bright fringe, since the central one is the 0th one, we get any nth bright, 7th bright fringe is formed, 7 beta. 11th bright fringe is formed, 11 beta. No confusion here. What about dark? You see, first dark, of course, reference is central bright fringe only. Where is the first dark? First dark fringe is here, D1, correct? But it is at a distance of not 1 beta, it is half beta. Am I right? It is half beta. What about second dark fringe? Bright to bright 1 beta, 1.5 beta. Second dark fringe is at a distance of 1.5 beta. What about the third dark fringe? Third dark fringe is at a distance of half beta, 1.5, 2.5, 2.5 beta. Because first central bright fringe to first dark fringe is half beta, 1.5, 2.5. So third one is 2.5. What about fourth one? 3.5. So you have to, if it is asked some n beta, you have to remove half from it. Can you see that? You see it here? Second dark fringe, 1.5 beta. Half plus 1. Third dark fringe, 2.5 beta. Fourth one, 3.5 beta. So it is half less than the n given. A dark fringe is formed at the distance of, sixth dark fringe is formed at a distance of 5.5 beta. Seventh dark fringe, 6.5 beta. 11th dark fringe, 10.5 beta. 0.5 beta less. So either you can use this formula, n minus half beta, or even n plus half beta also, but you have to put the next n. Which fringe is asked? From the central bright fringe, if the 7th fringe is for dark fringe is to be considered, then it is at a distance of 6.5 beta. Because for the first dark fringe, it is half beta. Then 6 fringes, 6 beta, 6.5. So 7th bright dark fringe is at 6.5 beta, 11th dark fringe is at 10.5 beta, but second bright fringe is 2 beta, 11th bright fringe is 11 beta. So here n beta, here n minus half beta. Okay, this is to be understood here. Okay, then using two different sources. Let me use two sources here, one blue and another red. According to the wavelength, you have beta. Am I right? When you change the wavelength, beta will change. How is wavelength and fringe width related? Fringe width and wavelength are directly related. Beta is directly proportional to lambda. Can you see that here? Yes, beta is directly proportional to lambda. Now, my question is, if beta is directly proportional to lambda, if you use a blue source here, how are the blue fringes arranged? First blue bright, dark, next blue bright, dark, but beta of blue is less, beta of red is more. Why, sir? Central bright fringe is formed at the same place, but dark fringes are far away for red, shorter and shorter distances for blue. Why, sir? Beta is less, lambda is less. If lambda is more, beta is more. So according to the lambda, we get beta. So that is a very beautiful relation here. If lambda is more, beta is more. If lambda is less, beta is less. So that has to be considered very firmly. So blue fringes are closer, red fringes are far away. Remember this. And another thing is, you see, let us consider a bright fringe here. Definitely, the central bright fringe is formed here only, correct? Here only. Definitely central bright fringe is formed. Now I will disturb one of the beams by placing a glass slab. It is like just like running. You take two athletes who are running at the same speed. Now will they meet together here? Yes, definitely, because the first athlete while running this distance, second athlete will also take the same time to run this distance. They will meet together. What about here? Here, this athlete has to run longer distance and this athlete has to run shorter distance. Definitely, second athlete will reach here earlier. No, sir. Both the athletes should reach here at the same time. So what we can do? You make this person to run in a clear track. For this person, you place some sand here, different medium. And while this person is running faster here, faster in the sense when he is about to reach here quickly, because his distance is nearer, he has to run in sand. Whereas that problem is not with this runner. This person has to run in sand. So will he be able to reach this here? He has reached this point here. He will also reach this point as this person has reached. So now my question is, if one of the beams is disturbed by a glass slab or any medium of thickness T, what happens is, in the ordinary case, if there is no disturbance like this, central bright fringe is formed here. If one of the beam is disturbed by a medium of thickness T, the whole fringes will shift upwards. Remember, out of the two beams, if one of the beam is blocked, not blocked, it is made to pass through a transparent sheet of thickness T. Fringe width doesn't change. This should be very clear. Beta is same. But all the fringes get shifted upwards. Last time when this glass slab was not there, the central fringe was here. When you introduce a glass slab, the central fringe shifts to this position. Beta remains same, but all the fringes are shifted to one side. And when one of the beam is disturbed by a medium of thickness T, shift in the fringes, that means from here to here, how much it is shifted? Beta by lambda into mu minus 1 into T, or you substitute for beta, beta is lambda d by d, lambda gets cancelled, d by d into mu minus 1 into T. Shift in the fringes when one of the beam is blocked by a medium of thickness T is this much. This is another criteria which you don't get in the theory exam. Okay, we are going to apply it in. So here you see this wave has to travel in a normal road, whereas here it has to travel through this and here. So there is a shift in the fringe. Remember, beta is not changed in this case. Only the fringes will shift. All the pattern will be shifted. Okay. Now, another thing is, if all the media, suppose this is Young's double slit experiment, and we get beta here, right? This is fringe width beta. Now, if the whole apparatus is immersed in water, what about beta? Will it remain the same? No, sir. Beta will change, and the new beta will be beta by mu. What is mu? Refractive index of the medium in which it is immersed. Very simple. So, if the whole Young's double slit experiment is immersed in a medium of refractive index mu, then the new fringe width beta dash is equal to beta by mu, because wavelength lambda dash is equal to lambda by mu. When that light travels in the new medium, where immersed medium, its wavelength will it will no longer be lambda, it will be lambda by mu. So hence the beta dash is beta by mu. Okay. Now, angular width of the central fringe. What is angular width? Now look into the screen. Two sources produce, coherent sources produce bright and dark fringes. When you stand here at the point of two sources, look into these two dark fringes or these two bright fringes. What is the angular width of the central bright fringe? Angular width is, you know, that dark to next dark, beta. At what angle they are in your eyes? Suppose you are standing on the ground and looking into two stars on the sky. How much angle those two stars will create in your eyes? That is called angular width. I want to know what is alpha. You apply simply that arc length is equal to L is equal to R theta. You know that formula. L is arc length, R is radius, and theta. Here L is beta, arc length, beta arc length is equal to radius d into alpha. So beta is equal to d alpha, alpha is equal to beta by d. You know that formula, L equal to R theta, right? Or L equal to d theta, I don't know which you apply. L arc length, R radius, and theta is the angle covered here. So alpha equal to beta by d. If you put beta equal to lambda d by d, then it's lambda by d. This is the angular width. That's how we have to do. So angular width of the central two consecutive bright fringes is dark to dark, for example, or it is the angular width of the central maximum, right? Central bright fringe. Central bright fringe starts from here, ends up to dark here. Starts from here, ends up to here. So central angular width of the central bright fringe is beta, alpha is equal to beta by d or lambda by d. It is simply L equal to R theta formula. This you must know that oil spread on the surface of water forms a very thin layer and it appears colored. That is because of interference. Thin layer of oil on the surface of water appears colored. Soap bubble appears colored. That is interference. This is interference. And a thin coating on the lens of a camera will be given. That appears colored. Interference. You must remember this, right? Soap bubble appears colored. Oil on the surface of water appears colored. Coating given to some lenses in the cameras appear colored. That is called interference on thin films. Thin film will produce interference pattern. Sir, for production of interference, we need two coherent sources. From where do we get coherent sources, sir? Here, very simple. Suppose this is the layer of oil on the surface of water, say. Then light ray will be reflected from here, and some light ray will enter and then get reflected. Now you ask this ray and this ray. From where did you come? You ask these two rays, this one and this one. One ray says, sir, I have come from sun, entered into thin film, came like this and then like this. What about this one? It has directly reflected from here, right? So what about the path difference? This ray says, sir, I didn't travel too much. What about this one? Sir, I traveled a longer distance. So is there any difference between them? Yes, there is a path difference. This wave travels longer, this wave travels shorter. That path difference creates phase difference and hence interference pattern. So if there is any oil on the surface of road, when it rains, in the initial raining, the oil floats on water. Now, just look into that oil from different angles, you will get different colors. Of course, here is a formula for the formation of bright and dark fringes. What is the condition for the formation of bright and dark fringes? If bright fringe has to be formed, then the condition is path difference 2 mu t cos r is equal to n minus 1, n minus half lambda. For the formation of dark fringe, it is 2 mu t cos r equal to n lambda. Of course, this is not so important for entrance exam. Nowadays, you don't get much questions from this. But for the timing, if you are interested, you can take the formula. This is for reflected light. When will be the reflected light will become bright and dark? This one. When will be the refracted light become bright and dark? For this condition. It is just interchanged, you see. Whatever dark here, we will see bright here. Suppose you go into water and look into oil layer will appear bright wherever it appears dark in the reflected light. So exactly ulta case. Okay. Then, okay, this is diffraction. So we will go to diffraction later. Already it is time, and we will see the questions of interference first. Then we will go to diffraction. Okay. In the next session, we will see some questions, or we will finish the diffraction synopsis, and then we will go to questions. So for the time being, today we will finish the class. It is up, time is up. And with these formulas and other things, only in interference, of course, I will move on to diffraction as soon as next class starts, next time, most probably tomorrow. Then we will take up the problems. But all these formulas are in your synopsis. I've already sent synopsis. Look into them. And already that question paper is also shown, it is given. So try to solve them. All these things are available there. So till that, keep working, and let us meet in the next class. Till then, have a nice time. Thank you for watching. Thank you.